Hello, my name is Kevin Mann. I am from South Carolina. I'm no one of consequence, really, but I am another concerned citizen as you. I love America. I have been overseas for some time. I'm still overseas, but I really want to come home. That's why today I'll start by giving out a shout out to Sean Ryan, Nick Irving, Joe Kent, Nate Carnaccia, or Valhalla. And I also want to commend all the comedians. The comedians, I think, have been at the forefront, the tip of the spear, we might say, because every time they have tried to censor us, that even we, average people, can see that they're trying to censor us when somebody makes a joke about it, like with Dave Chappelle when he was talking about transgenderism. And we could see that, why are they shutting him up? Because the thing is, this is a joke. He's finding the humor in these things. He's trying to help us through these tough times. The things that a comedian does is actually commendable. And so the fact that they use absurdity as a way to actually, and to provoke us and to basically, make us laugh, but these absurdities and these exaggerations, of course, are just a way to find humor in things. And so it's kind of really maybe aggravating or maybe disappointing to most of us when we see, people try to maybe cancel Dave. And that's why I think we can say Dave Chappelle was the comedian or the person they could not cancel. So we could say goodbye cancel culture because of Dave Chappelle. If it wasn't for Dave Chappelle, we probably would be still fighting it. Of course, you still have Mark Levin making these speeches about it. We'll cancel you.
You're damn right we're going to cancel them and deplatform them.
But the thing is the comedians have always been at the forefront of, look at Jimmy Dore and Kurt Metzger and Joe Rogan and, all these guys, Bill Brewer and all these guys. These guys are all basically, Jim Brewer. So, sorry, Mr. Brewer. But if you look at all these comedians, though, it goes back. It goes back through time. You had George Carlin talking about it for years, and before George Carlin, it was Bill Hicks, and before it was Bill Hicks, it was back in 1977. You basically had Richard Pryor, basically in an interview, he was saying, "Well, who do you think is going to be upset with you talking about, what are you going to do to America that's so bad?" And Richard Pryor says in 1977, "Stop racism."
What do you think that these executives are afraid you're going to do to white America?
Richard Pryor was one of the most influential comedians of his era. In an interview, he spoke openly about racial division and how it may be instigated to distract people from more important issues.
What do you think that these executives are afraid you're going to do to white America?
Probably stop some racism.
Stop racism?
Yeah. I'm probably afraid of that, because then people don't hate each other, and people start talking to each other, and then they start talking to each other, they find out who's the problem.
Which is?
Greedy people.
Greedy.
So, the thing is, even back then in 1977, the things I've been saying, that there is no such thing as racism. Sure, they concocted it, they fabricated it just so they could pit, just like the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, white versus black, Christian versus Muslim, and yada, yada, yada. All the different ways of divide and conquer. So the thing is, if you can basically divide people based on skin color, and I can go into it because I actually teach courses on it. And so the thing is I don't have time right now, though. On my next video, maybe I'll talk about how or why they would actually create racism. And there's actually a very interesting reason I have come up with why I think they came up with it. Of course, you don't have to agree with it. But, of course, anyway, I digress. What I do want to talk to you guys about today, though, is what if I ran for president? Not that I really would, but the thing is I want you to hear my plan, because I know if my life was on the line, the measures that I would take to basically secure my physical and financial and, my family well-being, I would basically do and take certain measures. So, for example, I would definitely go to a third party. You can't trust the DNC or the RNC. They've been compromised. They've been compromised for decades. However, if you can get on board with maybe the Libertarians or the Greens or whoever, or the Liberty Party, I think is what Robert David Steele actually used as a vehicle for his presidential bid. But I would find a third party. Within that third party, though, I would let them know I would not run as just president. You're like, what? What do you mean? What I'm saying is I would not go or run as president of the United States. I would say, no, that if I'm elected, I will bring a committee with me of 12 of my colleagues or friends who basically will come with me to Washington, D.C. or wherever, and basically play the role of president and fill that role as president as a committee. You're like, well, why would we elect you if you can't do the job yourself? Because I don't trust the establishment. I would never go into a room with a one-on-one or where I'm outnumbered 5-1. I'd roll up into Washington, D.C. like MC Hammer with my 12 bodyguards. That's the reason they never screwed with MC Hammer, is because, even the Crips basically were apologizing to him because he outgunned them. And the thing is I would never trust them. Has anybody ever seen that video where they basically have Bill Clinton putting on his makeup before a State of the Union address? He looks like he's drugged. Is he also like a, MK Ultra puppet or something? I mean, he looked drugged up, and I'm like, I would not put it past them to put drugs in me or to lace my drink or something, because the thing is I don't trust these people who are supposed to be in the establishment. I do not trust them. I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. So what I would do is I would go in, I would basically run for a president as a committee. I would let the Libertarians know that this is my intent. I would basically want them to understand what my platform fully was, because I do think that if they isolate you, they will destroy you. And so that includes me going up into the White House in the Oval Office by myself. They would basically find some way to either kill me or just render me obsolete, or impotent and obsolete, as Reagan would say. But the thing is, I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them, and I have no intention of becoming another victim. So I would basically say, well, I wouldn't even go to Washington, D.C. In other words, I might win with my committee, and we might do like these press conferences. But the thing is I would never allow myself to be outgunned by them, or where they outnumber me in a room. Because the thing is I wouldn't put it past them to sit there and assault me or kill me or whatever. So I wouldn't even probably go to the White House, honestly. This is the age of the internet. This is the age of where we can basically, everybody has a smartphone in their pocket and everybody has internet. So I'd probably just do my business, not in the Oval Office, because I wouldn't even come to them. I'd make them come to me. And so I would basically, with my committee, that basically my party, I basically would collectively rule. In other words, I would basically say, no. This is what we want. Not what I want, but what we as a party want. And so that's why I would say, no, you're going to have to face the committee. And so, sure, I might have a final say because I'm the one at the head of the ticket. But the thing is I would still share a lot of power, because I'm like, you're not getting me in that room by myself. I'm not leaving my guys out, outside. They're coming with me. And they're going to watch my back, and I'm going to watch theirs. So the thing is, no, thank you. But of course, in my platform, I would of course include that I plan to repeal NATO. I would let everyone know that was my plan. I might even give a date. And of course, I would probably suspend the United Nations. So you suspend it. Well, we might actually need it. Well, that's the thing is, we do need to basically maintain contact with these United Nations. That's because we need a foreign policy and that's where I would say I plan to repeal NATO and let them know that I haven't repealed NATO yet. And I do plan, what my third thing for draining the swamp would basically be to repeal the National Security Act of 1947. That created the National Security Council, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, CIA, and the Pentagon. I would basically repeal the whole thing. I would say there was no need for the national security state. It never was necessary. It was just a way for them to keep everything esoteric. In other words, keep it secret. In other words, they're not keeping secrets from each other or from other countries, because I dare say that the United Nations is not what you think. The United Nations basically was Rockefeller's pet. That's why he donated the land in New York City to the UN. And that's also why I would dare say that those 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, to an effect, they all work for the British. We all work for the British. In other words, the British elites basically have dominated since 1949. In other words, that's why they picked those 5 countries with veto power. I would strip them of veto power for one, maybe even to get rid of the United Nations Security Council. We'll see. But the thing is I think that's where we truly need to negotiate. That's where we truly need to make this a holistic fix. In other words, not a national fix, but a planetary fix, a global fix. In other words, when we go to the United Nations, have everybody replace their people. Replace the people that they have within the United Nations. Get rid of the bureaucrats who are lifetime bureaucrats. Basically start from scratch, get new blood in there, and basically say, this is no longer a federation of countries. This is now a confederation of countries. We all have our equal say. We all have skin in the game, and we want to downsize our military by, and I'm like I said, get rid of the national security state. We are willing to do it, but everybody is going to have to do it with us. In other words, the Russians, the Turks, everybody's going to have to get rid of their militaries. Everybody's going to have to at least downsize those militaries. And so I would negotiate downsizing every military on the planet. And I'm not kidding. Because the thing is about these wars and rumors of wars is just that, propaganda. I can go into that too, but I would challenge you to read the first paragraph of Edward Bernay's book, Propaganda, from 1928. Propaganda, Chapter 1, Organizing Chaos. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Habits and opinions. Habits and opinions. Haven't you heard that before? What's the definition of culture? Culture is the beliefs and behaviors of the people within a region. Habits and opinions. Beliefs and behaviors. Oh my God. Edward Bernays told you in the very first paragraph of his book in 1928. They're manipulating culture, people. What better way to pit, say, the Germans versus the English, or to pit the French against the English, or maybe the Russians versus the Americans, or the Japanese versus the Chinese? Basically, appeal to their jingoism or nationalism, their patriotism. So basically, this is what they've been doing for centuries, if not millennia. Hell, I mean, answer this question for me. Why did, say, 2,300 and whatever many years ago, I don't remember the exact figure now, but the thing is why did they have basically Socrates drink hemlock? I'm talking about the Spartans, because the Spartans had already won the Peloponnesian War when he drank hemlock. But I would posit, is it possible that the Spartans, they give us all these reasons why, they had him, executed, but, having commit suicide. But honestly, I would just say, were they just upset that he tricked them into having war? Because Sparta did not want to attack Athens initially. The Thessalonians basically appealed to the Spartans like 2 or 3 times, and they rejected 2 or 3 times that no, we don't want to go to war with Athens. Then why was Socrates espousing elitism? Plato's Book 6, and basically of was it the Republic? Anyway, I have to look it up for you, but I mean, when he talking about the boat, when he's basically talking about the boat, that's clearly, trust the experts, trust the people, the learned, trust those people who are the specialist. That's like capitalism. That's like the capitalist model that we have today, anyway, in North America, or the American model of capitalism. But honestly, I would dare say that even if you look, I forget I think his name is David Brager or something like that. But when he talks about money, Adam Smith was even wrong about money. So the thing is most of what we built our American capitalist society on is fraudulent.
Why the need to quantify promises happens, or to quantify them precisely. And we've had a story about why this happens that you read in your basic economic 101 textbook. It was actually invented by Adam Smith in 1776. The Wealth of Nations is the first time you see someone really making the argument in detail. It's an evolutionary series. Barter, money, credit, securitized derivatives, and whatnot are just sort of the last link in the chain. It follows logically. All right, so that's the story. As I say, there's one big problem. We've been scouring the world for over 200 years now, and we have never found a single community where everyday transactions take the form of, I'll give you 40 chickens for that cow. It's just they don't exist. You will end up in a situation often where the law says you owe me 27 heifers, or this means war. Swords are pulled. People are not willing to compromise. You killed my brothers. You insulted my mother, whatever it might be. You need to pay penalties, and you don't have heifers. Well, then you actually need to figure out exactly what's equivalent to what. So in those circumstances, in legal situations, particularly where there's a danger of a feud or outbreak of violence, in fact, people do need to quantify. And it seems like that's the first circumstance where you have something like money emerging. That association, then, of money and violence is a constant. And looking at the history of money itself, remember, we have this paradigm. First there is barter, then there's money, then comes credit, and that's wrong. Not only is it wrong, it's actually backwards.
It's not even real. So I don't want to go too far off the topic here, but these people have been lying to us for a very long time, and there's probably a reason that James Paul Warburg, probably when asked in 1950, about one world government, he said, and he was confident. He was like, "Oh yes, we either will have one world government through coercion or through conquest or something like that." I don't remember the exact words, but he basically was saying that, "Oh yeah, it was a sure thing." Why was he so confident? I posit that the reason he was so confident is because back in 1950, they had already achieved it. Because remember that by 1949, they had already picked the 5 countries they wanted as their United Nations permanent members of this Security Council. So, these people have been lying to us for a very long time. And of course, I kind of lost where I was going with this. But what I was saying though about the UN though is we need new blood in there, and so I would definitely try to work with other countries. We need a holistic fix. We need everybody working together, and I think because these people have been lying to us, talking about these wars and rumors of wars, they basically they can perpetuate it. Because they're the ones who basically can even create racism, even though racism isn't real. I mean, think about it. I mean, they can make something come to fruition. In other words, just because they see our authority figures do it. I mean, okay, maybe I'll go there then. Basically, there are six triggers that that people have that they train themselves to respond to. First of which is consistency. We are all taught that it is very virtuous to be consistent. In other words, how can you win a gold medal if you don't hit the bullseye consistently? If you're an archer, you need consistency. If you're doing great one day and not that great on another day, you will never get that gold medal. You have to push yourself consistently. So consistency is something we train ourselves to know and recognize as very virtuous. Reciprocity is something that we, maybe just naturally or innately respond to because it's natural, or it's human nature to basically, if someone's nice to me, I'm nice back. If they're mean to me, I'm like, ooh, they made me mad, so maybe I won't say anything nice. So basically that reciprocity is something that we also are trained to respond to. If somebody gives me a birthday present, I want to reciprocate. Or they lend me money, I want to reciprocate and pay them back. I owe them, right? So that reciprocity is basically I want to return the favor. Authority figures are basically those people who, anybody, even parents, but basically preachers, teachers, you name any authority figure, and we basically are, just assume that, oh, that person knows better than I do. They have the title, they earned it, so they know better than I do about what is proper. Why do you think we trusted Anthony Fauci for so long? We didn't want to question authority, because authority figures are supposed to know better than we do, right? So, liking, why do we get people that we like Michael Jordan or something, LeBron James? Why do we get these superstars to basically sell and pitch, endorse these products? It's because we usually trust people we like, right? And so they know it, and so we basically can't help it. We just have that knee-jerk reaction where we trust them. Norms. What is normal? There's a couple of things that within society, that we basically train ourselves to, or we don't even recognize that we're doing it. But we all have a moral compass. That moral compass comes from within. That moral compass basically helps me regulate, what's right and wrong. But then again, if you look at what Thomas Paine said in Common Sense, he said, the reason we even invented government was to control our vices. He said that in like the second or third paragraph. And of course, he was talking about, if I'm in the pursuit of happiness for my happiness, and I happen to step on your toes, if you truly believe that a society is a group of individuals coming together to, as John Locke would say, to sacrifice or clothe yourself in the compliancy of society, basically, and you surrender or acquiesce to the society and say, if they say drive or go on green lights and stop on red, then so by God, I'll do it. Well, that's of course why we say that we actually surrender, we comply with government, because we gave them that authority. We basically recognize that, I not everybody can have and say pick what laws they want to follow. In other words, that'd be anarchy, every man for himself. So we basically say, okay, we'll all comply with what government basically says. And that's why Thomas Paine says that, in other words, if you read Common Sense again, he's basically saying that we are basically just letting government be the arbiters of right and wrong and the mediators of right and wrong. In other words, they're the rule keeper. So if you have a dispute between two individuals within that society, then of course who resolves it? Hopefully somebody who is not subjective but objective. You want an objective judge. You want someone who can get in there and objectively evaluate both sides of the argument. Because the thing is, if there is justice, it's supposed to be blind, right? So that's why Thomas Paine was saying, technically, if you reread Common Sense, he's basically saying Government is not, it's not for security. It's because government is for the mediation and arbitration of law. And that's it. In the words of the rule keeper. So that's an awful lot of power just to bestow to somebody else to basically say, oh, well, you can get to decide for me what's right and wrong. Morality is from within. But then there's also something called norms. What is normal? What are the norms? Of course, some scientists call those social proofs. In other words, why do they add laugh tracks to comedy shows? Why do they, when they do these studies scientifically and people find, let's say, a wallet in the street, and then they basically start asking, well, what would my grandmother do in that situation? What would my grandfather do in that similar situation? What would he do? What would she do? Or, maybe when you go to the dinner party, and so you read the room. Am I overdressed? Am I underdressed? I don't want to be overdressed. I don't want to be underdressed either. I don't want to be the pariah. So the thing is we're looking for the norm. What is normal? What is acceptable? What is tolerable within society? So that's where normal comes from, right? The norm. So if you think about it, cross-cultural communication or intercultural communication, when we're analyzing how people are different in China and Russia and Germany and America and so forth, the only reason we even have that course, the only reason we even have intercultural communication as a course is because of the norms. Because you've either been conditioned, taught, or encouraged to behave that way or to see it that way. You have to be sure and say thank you when somebody does something like that to you. Or when you greet him, reach out your hand and say your name, shake his hand, right? So basically these things are norms. They're the norm. And so these norms, can you fake them? Actually, you can. You can fake norms. And that's why if you want people to behave a certain way because they have expectations to behave that way, then basically you can, as long as you create an echo chamber. An echo chamber is a place where people are exposed to or hear only opinions that reflect or reinforce their own opinion. And guess what? You can fake an echo, or you can create an echo chamber and monopolize the airwaves. That's why they basically control the media. That's why they control all TV. That's why they control all radio. That's why they control the silver screen. That's why they control all the media, is they created an echo chamber. I refer you to Oscar Callaway. Anyway, I think I've said enough, but I would do everything in my power to basically try, as if I was going to run for president, to return to an age where we had the Sherman Act, to where we had no Patriot Act, where we had no national security state. I would go back to that date in time and basically say, okay, let's start over. Let's basically go back to that point where I think that maybe our great-grandparents basically could say, this is safe. Let's go from here. I would say it's before the Industrial Revolution, because I would say the American model of capitalism is a fraud. For one thing, is planned obsolescence basically makes American capitalism base its whole economy not on quality but on quantity. It's all about quantity. Even economies of scale, all about quantity, not about quality. Sabotage your product. You need people to come back and buy the product. So maybe everything needs to be open source. Maybe we need to look at resource-based economies. I don't know, but we need to talk about it as a people. We need to decide what is best in our interest, because the thing is money has been used for leverage or as a lever to stay in power for these people, and they've been doing it a very long time. I'd say 2,000 years, ever since Socrates. So you're talking about 2,400 years almost. So you're talking about a very long time. Oh, by the way, the reason I brought up Socrates, that's what I forgot to say, was that Socrates, as he committed drank hemlock 2,400, 2,300 some odd years ago, maybe 2,352 years, something like that. But in 1953 is when they said that elitism entered the English language. Elitism entered the English language in 1953. Either our etymologists are not telling us the truth, or they're, anyway, you can't tell me for 2,000 years, even though the philosophy that Socrates was espousing on the boat, basically trust we need someone who's educated in seafaring and navigation. We need the experts. We need the specialist. And yet, this elitism didn't find its way to the English language for another 2,300 years. I don't buy it. Hopefully you don't either. So the thing is this is propaganda. Again, look at Edward Bernays, 1928. Anyway, thank you all. You guys have a great day. Sorry so long, and I'm agnostic, but I'll go ahead and say it. God save the Republic, in other words, long live the Republic, because let's save the Republic, everyone. Thank you.